Welcome to Tale Nest, where every story whispers a secret. Tonight.
It was late autumn when Emily Carter first decided to take the shortcut through the woods behind her apartment. The streets were familiar, well-lit, and safe, but the forest path promised to save her 10 minutes. That night, the wind tugged sharply at her coat, and the leaves underfoot crunched like brittle bones. Her backpack felt heavy, but not from books, her heart already thudding as she approached the shadowed entrance to the path. The path began narrow, lined with skeletal trees, arched overhead. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the ground. Fog rolled between trunks, curling around roots like ghostly fingers. Emily's breath came in puffs, and with each step, the quiet deepened. Too deep. Normally, she would hear squirrels, birds, maybe distant traffic. Tonight, nothing. Only her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. She paused, listening to the silence, feeling eyes on her before she even saw anything. A twig snapped behind her. Emily whipped around. Nothing. Only fog and trees. Hello? She whispered. No answer. Only wind rattling through the branches. She told herself it was a fox, a raccoon, something natural, but the feeling did not leave. The path seemed to breathe around her, and somewhere in the darkness, the hollow was waiting. 10 minutes deeper into the path, Emily sighed. A figure emerged from the fog, tall, unnaturally thin, wrapped in a long dark coat brushing the ground. Its head tilted slightly, not in a human way, but in a deliberate, measured motion. Emily could not see its face beneath the hood, but she felt the weight of its gaze. Her pulse spiked. Rational thought fled. She wanted to call out, but her throat had seized. She wanted to run, but her legs refused. The hollow took one step forward. The sound echoed through the trees, sharp and unnatural. Emily fumbled for her phone, flashlight trembling. She shone it toward the figure, but nothing was there. Not behind a tree, not retreating, gone. Panic surged. Emily ran. Leaves and branches whipped her arms and legs. Every rustle behind her made her flinch. Every step sounded like it was following. She did not stop until she emerged onto the street, gasping, knees trembling. That night, sleep offered no refuge. Every shadow in her apartment seemed to move. Every distant sound was the hollow waiting. Emily avoided the shortcut for a week. She walked the longer streets, stuck to well-lit areas, yet the hollow did not disappear. She saw it in reflections, dark windows, glass doors, puddles. She glimpsed it at the edge of her vision, unmoving, watching. The grin, too wide, fixed, impossible, haunted her even in daylight. One rainy evening, she walked a new route. Fog clung to the pavement. There it was, in the middle of the empty street, standing still while cars passed through it like smoke. Emily froze, her stomach twisting, heart hammering. A hollow tilted its head, slowly, watching. She stumbled backward, tripping over the curb, and ran. Nightmares followed. Every night, she was back on that path, fog curling around her feet, the hollow pacing slowly behind her. Slow, deliberate, inevitable. Always reaching, always smiling. She woke before it touched her, trembling, drenched in sweat. The terror became constant. Emily jumped at shadows, avoided empty streets, and never looked into dark windows or alleys. The hollow had taken over her mind. Months later, Emily convinced herself she was imagining it. Exhaustion, stress, anxiety, surely that was all. One night, she returned to the edge of the woods. The path lay ahead, silent and fog-laden. And there it was, the hollow, taller than she remembered, standing beneath the skeletal trees. Pale skin gleaming faintly, eyes like dark glass, grin impossible, fixed. Emily froze. Her phone slipped from her hand, screen shattering. Panic clawed at her chest. The hollow stepped forward. One slow, deliberate movement. Not human. She tried to scream. Nothing came. She stumbled backward over roots, branches scratching her arms. It stopped inches from her, tilting its head as if studying her soul. The fog swirled. Silence pressed in, then vanished. Emily ran blindly through trees, across roots, over the creek. Only when the streetlights of the main road hit her did she stop, shaking, gasping, drenched in sweat. Emily never returned to the shortcut. She takes longer routes, crowded streets, avoids the woods entirely. But the hollow remains. She glimpses it at the edge of vision, standing silently, smiling. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, she wakes to footsteps in her apartment, whispers that seem to brush her ear, voices calling her name. She doesn't know what it wants. She doesn't know why it follows her. But she knows it is waiting, patient, eternal. The hollow path is never empty. And Emily knows she is never free. Every time she passes the forest in daylight, she feels it leaning closer, remembering her, waiting for the moment she dares to walk alone again. My name is David Miller, and I've been a truck driver for most of my adult life. If there's one thing the road teaches you, it's patience. Long hours of silence, staring at endless stretches of asphalt, can make a man's thoughts echo louder than the hum of his own engine. It was the fall of 1983, and I was hauling a late-night load through Arizona, along that lonely stretch of Route 66. By then, I'd driven that highway 100 times. But that night, something about it felt different. The desert was unusually quiet. No sign of life for miles, except for the occasional tumbleweed rolling across the road. The clock on my dash flickered 2:18 a.m., and the only light came from my high beams cutting through the blackness. I liked night driving. Less traffic, fewer distractions. But sometimes, when the desert wind whispered against the cab, I'd catch myself feeling watched, even when I was alone. That night, I had an old country tape playing low, trying to keep my mind occupied. But no music in the world could drown out the strange stillness of that highway. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest, making every breath feel heavy. I lit a cigarette, cracked the window, and tried to shake off the unease. I told myself it was just another haul, just another long night on Route 66. But deep down, I had a feeling I was about to remember this night for the rest of my life. At first, I thought it was a trick of the headlights, maybe a shadow cast by a rock or a tree. But as I got closer, I saw her clearly, a young woman standing on the side of the road, waving her arm for help. She looked like she didn't belong out there, not in the desert, not in the middle of the night. She wore a pale blue dress, the kind that looked a little out of fashion, and clutched a small handbag. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, and even from a distance, I could tell she looked lost, maybe even scared. I slowed the truck. Now, any trucker will tell you, it's not always smart to pick up hitchhikers, especially at night. But something about the way she stood there, fragile, desperate, made it impossible for me to just keep driving. When I stopped, she walked up quietly, climbed into the passenger seat, and shut the door without a word. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to break the silence. Her voice, when it came, was soft. So soft, I almost missed it over the rumble of the engine. "Flagstaff," she said, "if you don't mind." Her hands were folded neatly on her lap, and she stared straight ahead. I thought maybe she was just cold or nervous, so I left it at that. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her skin looked pale in the dim light of the dashboard, almost too pale. And even with the heater on, the cab suddenly felt colder. We drove in silence for a while. The desert stretched endlessly around us, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. Finally, I tried again. Not the best night to be out walking, I said with a small laugh. How'd you end up on the highway this late? She turned her head just slightly, her eyes meeting mine. For the first time, I saw them clearly, dark, deep, and sad. My car broke down, she said. I just need to get home. Something in her voice made me shiver. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, like she'd been saying the same thing for a very long time. I nodded and focused back on the road. The silence stretched on again, heavier this time. A few minutes later, I noticed she was clutching her handbag tightly as if it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I tried to lighten the mood. Got family waiting for you in Flagstaff? I asked. Her lips curled into the faintest of smiles. Yes, she whispered. My father. Then she turned back to the road, and her face went blank again. I don't know how to explain it, but everything about her felt wrong. Her clothes looked dated, like something from the 1950s. Her voice had a strange echo to it, as though the sound was coming from somewhere far away. And the cold. God, the cold. The heater was blasting, but my breath was fogging up in the cab. After nearly half an hour of uneasy silence, she spoke again. You can stop here. This is where I live. I glanced out the window. There was nothing, just the desert. A stretch of cracked asphalt, and in the distance, the shadow of a large banyan-like tree near an old fence. No houses, no lights, no sign of life. You sure? I asked, frowning. Yes, she whispered. I slowed the truck, pulled over to the shoulder, and turned to tell her she might want to reconsider. But the seat was empty. I froze. My heart slammed in my chest. She was gone. I hadn't heard the door open, hadn't felt the cab shift. She had just vanished. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles went white. Finally, I slammed the brakes, threw the truck into park, and jumped out, scanning the road with my flashlight. There was nothing. No footprints in the dust. No sign of her at all. I climbed back into the cab, shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. By the time I reached a diner on the outskirts of Flagstaff, I must have looked like hell. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, poured me a cup of coffee and asked if I was okay. I told her everything. When I described the woman, the blue dress, the handbag, the way she'd asked to go home, the diner went silent. An older man at the counter turned to look at me, his face pale. That girl, he said slowly, died out there in a car crash. Back in 1957. She never made it home. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my truck, staring at the empty passenger seat, half expecting her to reappear. Every shadow on the road seemed to move. Every whisper of the desert wind sounded like her voice. Over the years, I've heard other truckers talk about her, the phantom hitchhiker of Route 66. Some saw her standing by the road. Others swore they'd given her a ride. Every story ended the same. She vanished before reaching home. I tried to tell myself it was just exhaustion, just my mind playing tricks on me. But deep down, I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And I'll never forget the cold. Even now, decades later, when I drive that stretch of Route 66, I keep my eyes on the shoulder of the road. And sometimes, when the fog is thick and the desert is silent, I swear I see her again, standing there in her pale blue dress, waiting for a ride home she'll never reach. It was late autumn of 2018, and my daily routine had become painfully predictable. I would finish my night class at 10 p.m., walk about 15 minutes through near-empty streets, and wait for the last bus that arrived at 10:30. The bus stop sat at the edge of town, where civilization started to give way to open plots and half-finished construction projects. Behind the stop stretched a field that had been empty for years. Weeds, broken bottles, and the skeleton of an abandoned billboard. Normally, there were a few other students waiting for the bus with me. We didn't talk much, just nodded politely and scrolled through our phones until headlights appeared in the distance. But on this particular Thursday night, I was completely alone. I remember checking the time on my phone, 10:22 p.m., 8 minutes until the bus came. It was colder than usual, my breath puffing out in little clouds, and the only sound was the hum of a distant transformer and the occasional flicker buzz of the nearest streetlight. That was when I heard it. Footsteps. The sound came from behind me, slow and deliberate, crunching against the gravel of the empty lot. At first, I assumed it was another student running late. I turned casually and froze. Under the nearest flickering streetlight stood a man. He wasn't doing anything. Not walking, not moving, just standing there, watching me. I could make out that he was tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing a long, dark coat that almost reached his shoes. His hair was slicked back, and there was something about his posture that felt wrong. Too straight, too stiff. Hi, I said, my voice sounding much smaller than I expected. No response. The man just stayed there, completely still, his face shadowed by the streetlight above him. Something primal in me wanted to run, but the bus was only a few minutes away. I told myself not to be paranoid. Maybe he was just another commuter. Maybe he was drunk and waiting for someone. Then he took a step forward. The sound of that single step echoed unnaturally loud in the quiet night. I felt my heart rate spike as he took another step, then another. Slow, deliberate, each step measured, like he was pacing himself. I backed up until my legs touched the bench at the bus stop. "Hey man, do you need something?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. No answer. Now he was close enough that I could see his face, and I wish I hadn't. His features looked wrong, too pale, too stretched, like someone had pulled his skin too tight over his skull. His eyes were wide and glassy, reflecting the yellow streetlight like an animal's. His mouth hung open slightly, as if caught mid-breath, but I never heard him breathing. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but before I could move, he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, showing too many teeth, and it stayed fixed like a mask. Then, without a sound, he tilted his head, slowly, deliberately, to the side, like a curious animal examining prey. I grabbed my phone, ready to dial someone, anyone, but when I glanced up again, he was gone. Not walked away gone, not ran into the field gone, just gone. There had been no footsteps, no sound, no movement. 1 second he was 5 feet away. The next second I was staring at an empty patch of concrete under the streetlight. I was shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. I didn't even notice the bus pulling up until the driver honked impatiently. I sprinted on board, nearly tripping over the steps, and collapsed into a seat. My hands were ice cold and my chest felt tight, like I couldn't catch a full breath. The driver gave me a weird look but didn't ask questions. I stared out the window the whole ride home, searching the roadside. And that's when I saw him again. He was standing in the field near the next intersection, illuminated by my bus's headlights for just a fraction of a second. Same stiff posture, same fixed smile, but here's the thing. That field was fenced off with a tall wire fence, one I knew for a fact had no openings. For weeks afterward, I avoided that bus stop completely. I begged rides from classmates, walked home early, even skipped classes just so I wouldn't have to be there at night. But I kept seeing him. Sometimes it was in the reflection of dark windows as I passed by shops at night. Sometimes it was at the edge of my vision when I took shortcuts home through alleys. Once, I swear I saw him standing in the rain on the opposite side of my street, perfectly still as cars passed through him, like he wasn't even solid. I started having nightmares, always the same one, where I was back at that bus stop, the street light flickering, and he was walking toward me slower and slower until he was close enough to touch me. I would always wake up just before he did. The last time I ever saw him was months later, when I finally convinced myself I had imagined the whole thing. It was early morning, just before dawn. I was on the bus again, headphones in, half asleep. We passed that same empty lot, and there he was, standing under the streetlight, staring at me as we passed, and smiling. I don't take the bus anymore.
Thank you for watching Tail Nest, where every story whispers a secret.